Everybody? Well, good afternoon, everybody. As most of you know, last week we held an issues conference with Republican senators where we talked about the path forward. We talked about confirming President Trump's nominees so that they can hit the ground running and begin to implement his agenda. And we talked about our legislative agenda for next year as well. And the one thing I can tell you coming out of that conference is Republicans united around making sure that President Trump's nominees are put in place and ready to roll up their sleeves and go to work, and that we also are prepared to take care of the people's business in this country and move forward with an agenda that will help get the country back on track when it comes to the economy, when it comes to energy, when it comes to national security, when it comes to the border. You will expect us to be moving forcefully and aggressively forward with an agenda that addresses those important concerns on which the American people voted in this last election. And I will tell you, we got a schedule, which I think you've seen. It's a pretty aggressive schedule in terms of the number of days we're going to be here, but it stands in stark contrast to the way that Senator Schumer and the Democrats have run the Senate for the last couple of years. If you look at where we are today, there is so much unfinished business. We have the National Defense Authorization Bill. We haven't considered yet. It's been available since June. The Senate Armed Services Committee reported it out in June, ready for floor consideration. Haven't taken it up on the floor of the Senate. Obviously a decision made by the Democrats. Same thing is true with all the spending bills. 11 of the 12 were reported out of the Appropriations Committee last summer, available for floor consideration. We could have had them on the floor, but like everything else, that's languished. Farm bill expired. A lot of farmers and ranchers out there wondering what's going to happen with no farm bill. A Water Resources Development Act, same thing. Supplemental assistance for disaster. You can go right down the list of the things that the Democrats didn't get done because they have been worried about elections for the last 6 months and not concerned about legislating on behalf of the American people. So we got a bit of a pileup. We're going to have to sort through this. But the one thing I can tell you about next year is it is going to be different. The American people, I will tell you, this is not, the way the Senate operates today is not the way it's going to be operating in the future. We aim to fix that, and it's high time that we start getting the American people's work done. And if the Democrats and Senator Schumer in the last waning weeks of this year aren't going to do it, we will take it up, and we will take the pileup that they've left us and deal with it next year.
Republicans and President Trump are ready to eliminate these painful regulations and pricey subsidies on electric vehicles. Remember, Democrats tried to force-feed the American people into buying pricey electric vehicles. They tried to ban the production of traditional vehicles. They tried to bribe the Americans with cash subsidies by buying electric vehicles. Well, we're going to stop that, and we're going to save taxpayers money in the process. I have a piece of legislation called the ELITE Act, because remember, these subsidies were really designed as a way to give these elite electric car buyers a subsidy, taxpayer dollars. The Wall Street Journal took a look at this and said the amount of money being spent on these programs is hundreds of billions of dollars more than the CBO ever anticipated spending. And you know what else? People are not interested even with the subsidies for buying these electric vehicles. We've seen it. The 2024 price sales for electric vehicles has been abysmal. even with the subsidies. There are many, many workers who lost their jobs because of the companies being forced into making electric vehicles. Ford, General Motors have reported massive losses as a result of this electric vehicle push by the administration. No matter any way you look at it, these things are piling up on the lots. When I talk to the dealers in Wyoming, they tell me that they can't sell these electric vehicles even at a loss. The American people don't want to be told what they have to buy. We're going to get rid of the car ban and these car bribes and put American drivers back into the driver's seat.
'Twas 5 years since the first case of COVID was reported. But today, throughout government offices, not a creature is stirring, not even a mouse. So, folks, this is my telework report, and it has revealed who is naughty and who is nice. Before COVID, about 3% of the federal workforce was teleworking. But today, 6% of the federal workforce actually shows up to work every single day in person. So the bureaucrats of Christmas past are sitting in bubble baths. Some of them have been sitting in jail. Some of them are running their very own small businesses while operating on the federal government dime. And the bureaucrats of Christmas present are asking Santa for permanent telework. But what we're going to do, 'tis the season to deck the halls with federal workers. So folks, you're going to have to come back to the office, and if they don't want to come back to work, we can make their Christmas wish come true. So again, folks, my out-of-office report is out. You may grab a copy. Feel free to peruse, and please call my office if you have any questions, because we will be there working. Thank you.
And we're glad you're there working, Joni. So last week I was honored to be invited by our fellow senator, soon-to-be Vice President J.D. Vance, to accompany him to Asheville, North Carolina, to view the damage of the flood in Appalachia. You might say, why you? And I asked the same question, why me? And basically, J.D. said, you know, you're an Appalachian, you understand Appalachian response and the difficulties in the rural areas to answering the difficult challenges of such a disaster. Well, we went to the Fairview Volunteer Fire Department, where we met with the family of Battalion Chief Tony Garrison. Tony Garrison left his home because he knew there were people in distress, and it was amazing the way everybody was so isolated down there because of the hills. But he and his nephew and his son went to rescue some folks they knew were in distress, and Mr. Garrison and his nephew lost their lives, and their son lived. And the widow and the family came and met with us to tell us about Tony, but also about the way he and volunteer fire departments all across this nation really rise to help and volunteer to help folks who are in need. I've seen this during our own tragedies and floods in West Virginia. But one of the frustrating things that Senator Vance, soon to be Vice President Vance, called attention to, that I think is something I'd like to call out again, and that is to ask President Biden and the FEMA officials to grant the waivers on the direct housing dollars. What they're doing is there's people, the day we were there it was 28 degrees. There are people that are living on their properties in tents several months later because FEMA will not allow them to use the direct housing benefit. And all the president has to do, and there's precedent for it, it's been done in the past, to get folks into a comfortable home while they're waiting, temporary home while they're waiting for more permanent housing, is for the president to issue this waiver through FEMA. So I'm imploring them and him to do this. There are numerous people that are living in unsafe conditions. The hotel rooms are full, and people cannot live an hour and 2 hours away because they're still working, they have families, and they need to be close by as they're protecting their property. So I also want to say that J.D. Vance was incredible talking to the Samaritan's Purse people that we talked to, but also the volunteer fighters and the professional EMTs that were part of the rescue crews. Our hearts go out to them. It's been a difficult time, particularly in that area of North Carolina. Vast damage. We were met by Senators Tillis and Budd, who have just been going to the mat for these folks. So I hope the President's people are listening. I hope the waivers come forward so these folks can spend their Christmases at least with a little comfort, knowing that they're close to home and safe housing.
Senator, there was word that Senator McConnell may have fallen at lunch. What did you witness, and is he okay?
He is fine. He's in his office, and any other questions about Senator McConnell will refer to his staff.
The NDAA has a number of pro-life provisions and even conscious protection provisions. How are you going to get that past the finish line when Democrats say that these are poison pills?
Right. Well, I mean, the NDAA final negotiation, I mean, they've had a vote on it in the Rules Committee in the House already. We expect they'll have it on the floor tomorrow. We expect to receive it from them probably on Thursday, and I would anticipate that Senator Schumer files on it. We probably end up voting early next week. But those issues have been fiercely negotiated. Obviously, there's a huge difference of opinion. As you know, anytime we do a national defense authorization bill, or for that matter, any appropriation bill, on some of the pro-life positions. But our side has fought vigorously to make sure that the pro-life provisions in the bill are strong, and that the Democrats don't weaken those.
Senator, at the retreat last week, you talked about border security, energy, defense, and the first reconciliation package. But what about some of the DOGE recommendations or spending reforms, deficit reduction? Does that move in the first package or in the second package? What's your vision on how to move that?
I'm a big fan of DOGE. I mean, I think that this is long overdue. We need a good scrubbing of the federal government. But I do believe that it's going to take us a bit of a time for them to, as they stand up that operation, take a hard look, scrutinize government operations, and figure out where we can achieve savings and efficiencies to be able to put that together into a legislative package. So that's why, in my view, it makes sense for us to move quickly on things we know we can do quickly: border, defense, energy, and then come back with another package that would address some of the savings that can be achieved through reductions in costs in various agencies and bureaucracies and government and programs, and then also deal with the expiring Trump tax cuts in a package later this year. But I think we can do both. We've got an opportunity to have a couple of different chances at a reconciliation package that would achieve all those objectives. One more, yeah.
As you know, there's a bicameral Republican push to delink our economy from China, specifically with a piece of legislation that would permanently end our most favored nation trading status with China. What is your view on that? What are the implications for the U.S. economy if we were to do that? Because it could ultimately result in another trade war.
Well, I mean, I think that the issue of the U.S. and our relationship with China is something that has received and will continue to receive a lot of scrutiny from members of Congress, and we'll be looking at policies that we think make sense in terms of promoting U.S. competitiveness globally, and if necessary, remedying some of the bad behavior of the Chinese. I mean, I think one of the things that the President Trump and his team, as they take office, are going to be talking about is how China cheats on trade agreements. And I think that we have to be looking at the world today in a very clear-eyed way through a lens that understands that there are lots of threats out there, national security threats, obviously economic threats, energy. I think we talked a lot about energy security being national security, and so as we address those issues, it will all be with an eye toward ensuring that the United States stays strong, competitive, and that where necessary, we're taking the steps to ensure that China is playing fairly and by the rules. And I think we know from past experience that they don't. And we know that they're constantly spying and trying to get into our networks. And I think we have to be very conscious of the threat that poses, not only to our national security interests, but I think to the daily lives and privacy of the American people. Thank you.